So have you ever noticed how when people see or meet your kids for the first time, they always feel the need to comment on who they look like? Oh my gosh, she looks just like you. He looks just like his dad, poor kid, right? So all of our kids are adopted. We have 4 kids, they're all adopted. And so we've had a lot less of that in our lives than most people. Like when you're white and you have a Chinese preschooler, people just more look confused at you more than anything else. And then they usually say, in our case, something dumb like, where are his parents? And we're like, we're right here. This is how it happened, all right? When Kai was like 4, we were at Disneyland and we were waiting in line to take pictures with Lightning McQueen and Mater over in California Adventure. And behind us was an Asian family. And we were waiting in line. And when it was our turn, we started to walk up there with all of our kids. And Kai was with us. And Kai's our Chinese son. And when he started to walk with us, the worker was like, no. You got to stay with your family, because there was an Asian family behind us. And he was like, oh, like that's my parents right there. And then she felt horrible and embarrassed. But it was pretty, it was a pretty incredible moment. But it doesn't matter if you did it the old-fashioned way, like most people, and popped those kids out yourself, or if you're like us and your kids were baked in somebody else's oven. Our kids reflect us for better or worse, right? So I'm not a fan of Crocs. If you've been around here for any length of time, you know that I tend to mock people. If you're wearing Crocs today, I will refrain because it's Sunday. I want to act like your pastor, so I won't belittle you and your Crocs. Last year, you guys all came together and got me a beautiful pair of South Hills Church Crocs. That's right. I haven't worn them a single time. They sit like a trophy on a shelf in my office. But I didn't realize that I had passed on my disdain for Crocs to my kids until a couple years ago. Our youngest son, his name's Kelton. When he was like 6, we were over at Scoops, which is a little ice cream shop downtown, and we were outdoors waiting on our ice cream. And this family walked up, this family of like 5 or 6 walked up, and I didn't even notice at first. And he just kind of turned around and he goes, and they're all wearing Crocs. And I looked, and sure enough, they were. They were all wearing Crocs. Our little guy Kai, when he was 5, we were in the car, and he said, "Dad, why does there always seem to be way more morons out when you're driving than when Mom is driving?" And I just said, because your mom's a better person than I am. That's why. See, but the truth is, and it's obvious, right? We all know this, that the people who raised us, they imprint on us in unavoidable and undeniable ways, right? The family that you grew up in, the parents that raised you, they inform how you see yourself. They inform how you see other people. They inform how you see the world, right? They shape how you think and how you speak and how you act and how you react. Like, have you ever done this number, if you're a parent, where you opened your mouth and your mom or your dad came out of your mouth, like the thing that you said, and it sounded just like them, and you're like, oh my God. No, I'm the only one. All right. So researchers tell us that most of who we are is actually the byproduct of 3 things. We're the byproduct of our biology, our temperament, and the environment that we grew up in, which I feel like for me as an adoptive parent is kind of good news, because if my kids act up, I'm just like, well, 2/3 of that ain't my fault. Like I'm only responsible for the environment, so we're off the hook. So, but as we grow up, what we experience in our home is so powerful, right, that we spend most of our lives either repeating our family's patterns or running from them. And you probably experienced that a lot in your life and watched that unfold in your own family and with your own kids and people you know. And it's true in obvious and not so obvious ways that often can land us in therapy, right? I mean, I don't have to tell you, everybody knows, it's self-evident that family's a big deal. And we could spend an entire series of messages talking about that. In fact, we actually do that. Every October, we have something called Family Month, and we spend the whole month just talking about family and marriage and relationships and raising kids and how to interact and love each other well. But this is not something new, right? It's always been that family is crazy important. And it's that way in almost every culture throughout all of history. In fact, while family is a big deal to us, when you look back for most of human history, family was a much bigger deal than it is today because it was about survival, right? It was just about like us being together and sticking together. Family was everything in the ancient world in pretty much every tribe, every society, every kingdom. And that was especially true for the Jewish people because it wasn't just cultural for them. In fact, if you go all the way back to the beginning, for the nation of Israel, for the Jewish people, back to when God was kind of laying the ground rules or the foundation for them for a functioning society, family was right there in the middle, a huge part of that conversation. You may know it in this way. In Exodus chapter 20, verse 12, you've probably heard this verse where God gives this commandment. He says, honor your father and mother so that you may live long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. Now, if you grew up in church, this is one of those verses that gets taught to kids in church. But when God said it, he wasn't actually talking to kids. He was talking to adults. And so he says, honor your father and mother. And honor was a loaded, multifaceted word for the Jewish people. Yes, of course, it meant to respect and support and love them like it does for us. But it was bigger and deeper than that. It also meant to prioritize them, to defer to them, to follow their lead. In fact, the Hebrew word that gets translated as honor in English means to give weight to or to give extra weight, to be weighty, like what they say, who they are, what they're doing, that the scales get tipped in their favor. And so the importance of family was huge because it wasn't just part of their culture, it made God's top 10 list, right? The top 10 commandments. And it wasn't just a one-off either. In fact, when you open the scriptures and begin to read the things that God says and the conversations he's having with us, the Old Testament and the New Testament are filled with these instructions to families, the instructions to couples and to parents and to kids and how to relate to your parents and how to have healthy relationships. It's absolutely clear from the scriptures that God cares deeply about how we relate to and treat everyone, but especially those closest to us. Which then brings us to Jesus. So as you saw in the bumper there, the last couple of weeks, we've been in a series of conversations about Jesus because no matter what you believe about God, no matter where you're at on the spectrum of faith this morning, all of us have an image of who Jesus is and what he was like. We have this conception, this idea of what we think he was about and what he was like and what we've heard. But often when we open the scriptures, we actually see regular moments that blow those ideas, those preconceived notions that we have, that blow them out of the water. And so we've been looking together at some of these snapshots through the life of Jesus where he said or did things that were kind of weird or confusing or challenging or outrageous or maybe even offensive. And so today we're actually going to look at something that he said that involves family. It's found in Luke chapter 14. Beginning with verse 25, it says this. It says, large crowds were traveling with Jesus, and turning to them, he said, if anyone comes to me and does not hate father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple. Happy Mother's Day. Let's pray. That's all I wanted to share with you this morning. Now, what's interesting is that this isn't something like Jesus was trying to hide, right? It wasn't like he gathered a few of his closest, most devoted followers together and he's sort of whispering it off the side. No, Matthew tells us like this is something he said to a huge crowd. Like if you come to me and you don't hate your mom and dad and you don't hate your wife and kids and your brothers and sisters, you can't be my disciples. And I don't know what you experience emotionally when you hear those words, but part of me is like, wait, what? What are you talking about, right? I thought Jesus was all about the love, man. And he is. Like just check out Matthew chapter 5, verse 44. Jesus says, I tell you, love your enemies. Wow, okay. So love your enemies and hate your mom? Not mama, right? We're just supposed to love those who hate us and hate those who love us? Doesn't make any sense. I mean, is Jesus really trying to break up families? Maybe you're thinking, well, whatever is going on here, why in the world would you bring this up on Mother's Day, man? That's just weird. So how do we actually begin making sense of this? Well, for starters, we've talked before about how when you read the Bible, you should never just read a single verse. You need to read the verses around the verse that you're reading. You need to understand what's going on and what's being said around that verse. Because if you read only a single verse, which we tend to do, because we like little quick, pithy sayings and bumper sticker things and things that can go on a magnet that go on our fridge, right? We tend to like isolate verses. But if you only read a single verse from the Bible, not only are you missing the context of what's being said, you're probably missing the point of that particular verse. And you may even arrive at a conclusion that that is the exact opposite of what God's actually saying. So if you were to go back and look at Luke chapter 14, when you'd zoom out a little bit from the 2 verses we read, right before Jesus said the whole hate your mom and dad thing, he told this really long, elaborate story, this long parable. And you absolutely should go read it. We don't have time to read it today, but you should go read it later. It will help frame a little bit of what's going on here. And so the parable that Jesus tells is about a man who prepared this amazing banquet for his friends and neighbors, for all the people he loved and cared about. And only when it came time for the actual banquet, because their priorities were all out of whack, the people that he prepared the banquet for, they took his generosity for granted. And so one at a time, they all began to beg off and make excuses for why they couldn't come to this man's banquet. And so then the man then gathers his servants together and sends them out into the streets, sends them out into wherever they can go to bring in all the randos and strangers they can find, anybody and everyone who was willing to accept the invitation to come to his great big feast, this beautiful, meticulously planned banquet. Now, every time Jesus told stories, everybody listening to them, and we certainly should do this as well, but everybody listening to them is trying to find, we know God's in this story somewhere. We know we're in this story somewhere. So they're trying to find their place in the story. And so God is very clearly the one who's planning the banquet, who's throwing the party, and he's throwing it for people, but the people are just disinterested. And it's after all of that, it's after that parable that then Matthew tells us that Jesus says the thing about hating your family. See, here's the thing. What Jesus said actually wasn't about hating anybody, least of all your family. It was about us, all of us, recognizing the generosity of God towards us, prioritizing what he's done above everything and everybody else in our lives, including ourselves, and then understanding that there's a cost involved in following Jesus and living his way, of moving in, of accepting his invitation to come to his banquet. That there's an opportunity cost that's happening, that you're gonna have to leave behind and you're gonna have to reprioritize some things. Okay, but why did he have to use the word hate? Honestly, I think this is kind of Jesus 101. See, Jesus regularly said and did provocative things, but he didn't do them for attention. He didn't do them for clicks and likes. He didn't do them to get a big crowd. He did them to provoke. And so to break through 1,500, the momentum of 1,500 years of religious thought and belief and practice and tradition and cultural tradition, Jesus regularly used parables and stories and metaphors and comparisons and yes, even hyperbole to get people to stop and think, to challenge the way that they thought about God and faith and life and themselves, and to lead people to the truth that was right in front of them, but they couldn't see it because it was buried behind all of their own tradition and rules and religion. So there's this other place in Matthew where Jesus is teaching and he says something really similar to what he says in the verses in Luke, but he comes at it from a slightly different angle. Check it out. Matthew chapter 10, verse 34, it says, "Do not suppose," this is Jesus talking, "do not suppose that I've come to bring peace to the earth." This is nobody's favorite verse. Nobody's like, what's your favorite verse? It's the verse where Jesus says he came to bring a sword. "Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be the members of his own household." And if If you hear that and you got some strained relationships in your household, you're like, see, Jesus gets it. He gets it, man. He knows. You are my enemy. So I read an article recently about how back in 1989, the country of Czechoslovakia broke free from the Soviet Union and from communism, and it was split into two different nations, both of which were pursuing democracy, but for demographic reasons decided to become separate nations. So it was the Czech Republic and Slovakia. And that revolution, that breaking free from communism, that breaking free from the Soviet Union, it was called the Velvet Revolution because there was no violence, there was no rioting, there was no upheaval during that revolution. But the violence and the rioting and the upheaval actually came later when all of those who during the reign of communism, who had been imprisoned and tortured and isolated for their faith, people who had lost family members who had been killed for proclaiming their faith, when all of those people, when the threat was removed of communism, when all those people started coming out and talking about it, when they began discovering who it was that had turned them in when it was against the law, because it wasn't the KGB, it wasn't even some sort of infiltration of the government. In most circumstances, it was a father turning in his son. It was wives turning in their husbands. It was children turning in their parents. It was neighboring pastors turning in one another. The enemy that they could not escape were the members of their own family. Yeah, but man, that's like communism when we're like a million miles away from that, which may be true, but I think there's a part of this conversation where Jesus is going, if you choose to step into, to unwrap the life that God has for you, if you choose to step into a relationship with me, there will be people that you love that are close to you who may actually turn against you. And what are you going to do? How are you going to respond if that happens? Because there's always a cost to freedom, right? And that's true whether or not you're talking politically, like in the case of this nation, right? Or personally, but definitely spiritually, there's always a cost to freedom. See, I think somehow we've interpreted the message of Jesus in a way that where it costs us nothing. Like we sacrifice nothing. We don't have to give up anything. There's no cost in following Jesus. But Jesus himself, I think in both of these conversations is actually standing in opposition to that idea. He's going, no, there could be a cost and it could actually affect the relationships under your own roof. He's going, faith isn't just about recognizing the generosity and the love and the grace of God. It's also understanding that living your life God's way is going to end up costing you something. See, the truth is every time you decide to put Jesus in like front and center in your life, it's going to cost you. It just will. If it doesn't, he's not front and center. And so Jesus says, you think I've come to bring peace, and I did, because he said that in all kinds of places, right? But sometimes what you're going to experience is controversy and conflict. You think I came to bring love, and I did, but sometimes what you're going to experience is hate. You think I came to include everyone, and I did, but sometimes what you're going to experience is being excluded, pushed out. Sometimes it's your family and friends that become the sword against you, against your faith. So it's not something that we talk about a lot very much at church, especially in our culture. But when you begin to step into a deeper life, a fuller life, when you begin to elevate and live into all that God has for you, when you move toward a life of generosity and love and sacrifice and purpose, often the greatest resistance will come from the people who are closest to you. Because those people often will experience your growth and your change and your choosing God above everything else. They will experience that as rejection or betrayal or judgment or even hate. I actually think we can easily see and understand this idea when you think about it in terms of just strictly like generational baggage. It doesn't only apply to that, but we can really understand it. I mean, who decides? And you think about your family and what you inherited from your parents and grandparents, what you might be passing on to your kids. Who decides when enough is enough in your family tree, right? Like who decides when that addiction or that abuse or that dysfunction or that habit or that pattern that's running your family for generation, who decides like it ends with me? Who decides that you hate that legacy enough, you hate that part of the story enough to actually do something about it? And often when you begin to do something about it, it means taking action. It means setting boundaries. It means making priorities. And doing those things feel like indictments, feel like betrayals, feel like judgment to the people in your family. And it's no different when it comes to living a life of faith. See, my experience as a Jesus follower has been this. Sometimes what God wants to do in your life will feel like an indictment or a betrayal or a judgment to other people, even when it's not. But just like with your family baggage, in order to choose the future that God has for you, you have to let go of the past and step into the place that he's leading you. So there's this funny story in the family of Jesus, his earthly family, where we can kind of see many of these dynamics, I think, kind of play out a little bit. It's found in Luke chapter 2, and it takes place when Jesus was 12 years old. So I talked last week about how there are so many of these moments in the Gospels when you follow the story of Jesus where Jesus defends people and he stands in defense of people, but there's also moments where Jesus stands in defiance of them. And when you think about Jesus being 12 years old and Mary and Joseph, his parents, trying to raise him, like, can you imagine being the parent of Jesus, like having a perfect child? Like, I was not anywhere close to being a perfect child. I love my kids and they're all amazing, but none of them were perfect children. And as I was thinking about it this week, like I wouldn't want to be the dad of I mean, it'd be terrible if they're 5 years old and you correct them and they go, no, that's wrong. You're like, okay, it's time for bed. No, this really isn't the right and optimal time for me to go to bed, Dad. I think it'd be the worst having a perfect child because you want to be right at least some of the time, right? But this is what happens in Luke chapter 2. It's his first public act of defiance, beginning with verse 41. It says, every year, Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of the Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up to the festival according to the custom. And after the festival was over, while his parents were returning home, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but they were unaware of it. Thinking he was in their company, they traveled on for a day, and then they began looking for him among their relatives and their friends. So if you're tracking, God entrusts his son to these two people, and they promptly lose God's kid. Not only do they lose him, they were unaware that they had lost the Son of God. And if you're a parent this morning, I want you to know you may have made some mistakes, but at least you didn't lose God's Son. Whenever I read this story, every time I read it, I feel better about my own parenting because I lose everything all the time. I lose my phone, my keys, my wallet, my AirPods, my shoes. These days, it's mostly my glasses or my glasses case. Every day, I'm like, anybody see my glasses? Anybody see my glasses case? It's just everywhere. And yes, as a dad, there's even been times where I've lost my kids a couple times, but it was only for a few minutes. They lost God's kid and didn't even notice for an entire day. To which I go, how quiet was Jesus? Right? Because I'm not sure what your kids are like, but if they're gone for a couple of hours, I notice. What is this glorious experience that I'm having right now? Oh, that's right. It's called silence. So once they noticed, this is what happens, verse 45. When they did not find him, they went back to Jerusalem to look for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple courts, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking questions. 3 days? What did he eat? I don't know what your 12-year-olds are like, but my kids stand staring in the pantry and the fridge all the time. Where did he sleep? What was he doing? After 3 days, they finally found him at the temple, which tells you that was not at the top of the list of the places they thought to look for their 12-year-old. They're like, is he in like Disneyland Jerusalem? No, he's not over there. Like, is he just living in a park now with the homeless people? What's going on? No, he's in the temple. Verse 47, it says, everyone who heard Jesus was amazed. He's 12 years old. Everyone who heard him was amazed at his understanding and his answers. And also that he had no parents. Like, where are your parents, kid? You've been here for 3 days. What are you doing? Did you sleep here? Verse 48, when his parents saw him, they were astonished. And his mother said to him, son, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been anxiously searching for you. Now, this is how you know this story is true, because of what happened when they found him. If you're younger and you don't have kids yet, or your kids are still really young, pay attention, because this story is very instructive. Because once you're married, if you got a kid who disappears and they've been missing for a long time and you're freaked out and panicking, the father doesn't get to say anything when you find the kid. Mama's gonna speak for everybody, okay? Son, why have you treated us like this? Because it's always personals with mom. Like, why did you do this to me? Why did you do this to us? I just imagine like she's turned away and Joseph's standing there like, dude, we were worried about you, man, and we're glad you're okay, but 3 days? That's awesome. Give me some of that. Little fist bump. And she's just like, your father and I have been anxiously searching for you. And he's like, yeah, that's right. Listen to your mom. What were you thinking? Leaving. Notice the way that Jesus responds in verse 49. He says, why were you searching for me? Didn't you know I had to be in my Father's house? But they did not understand what he was saying to them. He's like, why were you searching for me? He's basically like, hey, mom, what's your problem? Like, I was in the right place. Where were you? Didn't you know? I mean, I'm 12 and I knew. Didn't you know where I was supposed to be? Have you ever had a defiant middle schooler? When I read this, there's part of me that thinks, man, if Jesus was my kid and he talked to me or my wife like that, he wouldn't have died on the cross. He would have died way sooner than that, right? But why is Jesus being so defiant? Because he's acting like they're the ones that were doing something wrong. See, I think so often we think that he's only angry or upset when really evil things happen in the world. But here we find that Jesus was defiant of a life that was lived off point. They weren't doing anything really wrong. They weren't doing the wrong thing. They just weren't doing the right thing. And so the story says that they traveled an entire day and didn't realize that they had left Jesus. And I think that if you're a person of faith, this is the temptation. This is actually something that happens for us. That it's possible for us to live entire days or weeks or months without realizing that we left Jesus behind somewhere in the rearview mirror. In fact, it's possible to be so wrapped up in religion that you live a lifetime not realizing that you left God behind a long time ago. I think one of the most profound and challenging things about this moment to me is that it served as this transition point for Joseph and Mary. That they were having to move from just loving and adoring Jesus as their earthly son to actually having to listen to and follow and worship him as the Messiah, God in the flesh, the King who's come to take over. And the thing is, that's true of us too. See, I think part of what Jesus is driving at with all this stuff about hating your family is that you're eventually going to have to decide who or what you're living for. And God will bring you to a point where you have to move from just sort of being a fan of Jesus and just kind of loving the fact that he loves you and gives you grace, where you actually have to begin to follow him because he's not just the Savior, he's the King. And honestly, that's how you can know if you really love Jesus or if you just kind of are in love with a caricature of Jesus. Are you willing to put him front and center and follow him no matter what? Because following Jesus is supposed to be this whole of life experience. And there's going to be some tension that comes with that. There's going to be some cost that comes with that. That it's not go to church on Sunday to get God off your back and kind of square things away for the week. It's not like, God, I really love that you're forgiving me and I punched my ticket to heaven. Now leave me alone for the rest of my life. It's not, God, you can kind of help me in this area, but stay out of that area. And so Jesus looks at Mary and Joseph and is like, it's almost like he's going, we just came from the Passover. Did you miss the point of it all? Why didn't you know where I was supposed to be? Why were you not there? Do you not recognize the generosity of what God is doing? Do you not know at this point why I'm here? Why is that not a priority to you? Did you not expect there to be a cost when God entrusted his son to you? See, I think one of the challenges of life is a lot of us just sort of live on the momentum of what has been, of our past, of our families, of our choices, of where we came from, of breaking free of that, whatever it is, and including in our faith. Maybe at one time you were doing exactly what God wanted you to do, but now you're just sort of living on the momentum of that. I think that there's some times where you have to stop doing what you've been doing in order to make sure that you're doing the thing that you're supposed to be doing. I think sometimes we have to stop living how we've always lived and to make sure that we're living the life we're supposed to be living. And by the way, that's actually what the word sin means. It means to miss the mark. It means to be off point. It means you're aiming for the wrong target. You're living for yourself. It means to be living a life that you were simply not created to live, to be living a lesser life. And I know that feels like maybe that's like semantics or that's subtle, but it's not. It's not religious mumbo jumbo. It's why Jesus came. Are you just living how you've always lived? Are you just maintaining the status quo in your faith? Or are you living the life that you're supposed to be living? Because Jesus stands in defiance against a life that is poorly lived, no matter the reason. By the way, allegiance or obedience to God is not God's end goal for you. It's life. Life is his end goal for you. Because when God talks to us about making him a priority, it's always in the context of our freedom and what's best for us. In John chapter 10, verse 10, Jesus addresses this head on. And he's like, there's a thief, and that thief's purpose is to steal from you and to kill you and to destroy you. But my purpose, the reason I've come, is to give you a rich and satisfying life. He's going, it's possible for you to have your life being robbed from you and you not know it. Because there's a thief that's stealing from you, that wants to get you concerned and worked up and caring about anything but where life is found. Focused on yourself, building your own empire, chasing wealth and fame or whatever it is that we get caught up in. And if you're not careful, you will get to the end of your life and realize that your life has been stolen from you. But the reason I came to give you life, a rich, satisfying, full life. And so here's the question I have for you this morning. What is it that defines you in your life? I mean, be honest with yourself. Be honest with God. What's front and center in your life right now? What's the top priority? What would you sacrifice anything for? What are you exhausting yourself in the pursuit of right now? What would you trade everything else to get access to? If it's anything other than the generosity and goodness of God, if it's anything other than Jesus, you're living off point. And so this is what I want to challenge you with this week. This is what I want to challenge you with on this Mother's Day. Absolutely. I said a lot of stuff. Just in case I didn't say this, be nice to your mom today. Call her. Tell her you love her. Don't buy her flowers. Buy her some onion rings. Am I right, moms? All right. The flowers are going to die in a couple days, but those onion rings, they'll live on. And then say yes to Jesus. Make him front and center. Begin to move your life. Begin to assess, like, is what he says, is who he is my life, is my relationship, my faith, is it a whole of life experience? Or is it just kind of this thing that's off? Is it just an add-on? Maybe you've been stuck in that, you're a fan. You believe. You're excited. You're thrilled that he loves you and he forgives you, but you're just kind of like stuck in that place. And you've been there for a very long time. You're a regular church attender, and he's going, that's great. It's time for you to actually start following me. It's going to cost you. If you came here this morning and you're not even sure about all this God stuff, church is not really your thing. Somebody bribed you with lunch or something. Or your mom said, what I really want is for us to go to church as a family. Because moms are better than dads. Dads are like, what I really want is for you guys to go to church as a family. And I'm going to go play golf or fishing or whatever. But if you're somebody that's not sure about all this God stuff, I get it. But I want you to know that Jesus came for you. He came to bring you life. And his invitation is for you to come and experience his love and his grace and his goodness. That God has been preparing this feast and this banquet for you. How tragic to be like, let me just kind of live my life for a little bit and then I'll come check it out. He's just inviting you to come to his banquet, to his feast. Let's pray together.
South Hills Church, I just want to take a moment and say thank you for watching our service online. Whether you're watching it for the first time or you're watching it again because you enjoyed the service so much from the weekend, I'd like to take a moment and dive into our giving. Every week we give people the opportunity to give back and give to the local church so that God can continue to bless your lives and bless your finances. Here at South Hills, we believe that everything comes from God. We believe that he's the one that chose us and brought us into this world, gave us our gifts and talents and abilities. And I just want you to know that when we give, we are giving back what God has already given to us. If you've ever seen any of our envelopes at a South Hills campus, you'll see on there that it says, every week at South Hills, your generosity is giving people the opportunity to live a better story. And there's a scripture on there in Matthew chapter 6, verse 21 that says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So I want to encourage you today to click down below and set up your giving, whether it's for the first time or whether you're doing reoccurring giving. We have 4 ways to give here at South Hills. 1, you can do it in person at any of our campuses through an envelope. Or 2, you can actually text any amount that you would like to 84321. And the 3rd way is to download our Church Center app. I encourage you to do this one because the Church Center app gives you opportunity to stay connected with our church and your campuses. It's a great tool and resource for you to know what's going on. And the 4th way to give is to give online. You can go to southhills.org/give and you can set up your giving there. Whether you're a guest of our church or whether you are a member of our church, or whether you simply just like to watch our services, I encourage you to trust God with your finances so that he can bless and anoint your finances, and you can be trusting God in this journey of living life to the fullest. I love you, and thank you for watching our online service today.